Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so refreshed, so energized, ready for this afternoon. Can't wait to jump in and talk more and hear more and learn more and grow more and feel more and become more. Teju, how are you feeling?
Wow. Well, I just love your energy always, Jordy. I'm feeling so good. I had a really lovely lunch that my mom made because there wasn't much time for me to transition from different things, but so kind of her. And then got to participate in two beautiful empathy breakout sessions,
Mm,
which the people here, whether they're speaking on panels or whether they're attendees, are just luminous beings. And I'm just grateful to be in everyone's presence. So I'm feeling
yeah.
great.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I feel the same way. Yeah, it's kind of like when you view this experience as a mirror and you see the people who are here and they're so beautiful, you can't help but feel beautiful yourself, which is such a nice thing. It's nice to be in a space where you feel beautiful, and I hope everyone's feeling that. The breakout session that I went to was about radical self-love, so I'm feeling particularly in love with myself right now. um, I hope everybody feels that way. It's just such a nice feeling. Well, we've got a lot to cover in the afternoon, but we're about to jump into our relationships panel, right?
That's right. But first, we're going to do some polls. This is our little
Yay,
aperture into all
polls!
of you because we love getting to know you so much that what better way to get to know you than to ask you a poll question. So, Michael, can we bring this first poll on the screen so you should all see it here? It says on a scale of 1, not very, to 5, very, how open and receptive are you to seeing things from another person's point of view and offering empathy in your relationships? Jordan, I'm guessing that this is important for relationships, but I don't know for sure.
Empathy in relationships? Nah. Who needs it?
So we'll give this poll maybe another 7 to 8 seconds. When
5,
you use an odd number
4,
like that, people think you're being
3,
more precise.
2,
That's what I've learned.
1, 0. Share those
Wow.
results.
Wow. It looks like we're quite open and receptive to seeing things from other people's point of view. I'll say from our empathy breakouts, it definitely feels true about this particular gathering of humans.
That tracks, absolutely.
And
Cool.
we have one more poll, I think, also about identify how we identify.
Yeah.
And Jordan, you've explained this before, and I think you put it beautifully that we asked this poll so that as organizers, we can better design this experience for the people who are here. We know this poll is imperfect, but there's lots of options where you get to say your gender is not represented here, or that you really don't like this question, or more than one of the above, as well as claiming what the identity that feels true and feels good for you. So we'll give this one another 8 seconds as well.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close that poll. Show those results. Awesome. Looks like we are primarily cis women. I'm so glad that all of you are here. No matter how you identify, it's really, really nice to be in this space with all of you. Why don't we bring in Stelli? I miss Stelli. Stelli, I'm
Hey,
so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here, Jordan and Teju. Thank you.
Absolutely. How's your day going so far?
It's going great. I'm learning a lot, feeling a lot, processing a lot. Yeah, I went to
Same.
the sexuality panel with Sam and Alapaki, and they're on this panel as well.
That's incredible. I can't wait to hear more. Tell us about what's so exciting to you about this panel.
Yeah, sure. So the main thing is that we have so much expertise, Jordan. We have folks who are therapists, mentors, trainers of other therapists. Our panelists have worked with heteronormative couples, gay, lesbian couples, trans and non-binary couples in relationships. So we're going to learn a lot today about how gender dynamics play out in relationships. Not to mention that everybody's got their own personal experience with their partners, many of whom are on the call today. So to kick off this panel, I'm really excited to introduce everyone to Helen and Harville Hendricks. Helen and Harville, your partners, welcome. You're partners in every sense of the word, in life, in work, and in play. You've been married for over 30 years, have 6 children, 7 grandchildren. I mean, you've done a ton in your life and career to transform how we understand relationships and to help us move to a more relational culture. Just some more things about you all. You're the co-creators of Imago Relationship Theory and Therapy. You've trained over 2,500 therapists in over 53 countries. You're the authors of 3 New York Times bestsellers, Getting the Love You Want, Keeping the Love You Find, and Giving the Love That Heals. And Harville, you're a couples therapist with over 40 years experience as an educator, clinical trainer, and lecturer. And your work has appeared on Oprah 17 times. That's amazing. And Helen, you're the author of Faith and Feminism and The Spirit Moved Them. You were also installed in the Women's Hall of Fame for your leadership in the global women's movement. So thank you very much for your hard work there. So we clearly have a lot we can learn from both of you, and we're really happy to have you kick off this relationships panel. So I'll start with just a couple of questions, and you can take it from there for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll have the other panelists spend about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll all be together to talk about what came up. So to start, I'm just curious, how do gender dynamics affect committed romantic relationships, both yours and your own relationship and those of your clients? And what are some of the issues that you're seeing currently and how people are navigating the challenges? I mean, I would imagine that's transitioned over the last 40 years, or maybe not. Maybe we're still dealing with the same issues. So I'll turn it over to you.
Can I begin?
Sure.
So I'm part of a family-owned business, and I really receive funding. And I did something that, Stelli, as you said, I was inducted in the Women's Hall of Fame, and it was around gender equality. But I call that my head work. My heart work has always been imago therapy and people who are suffering in their relationship, and we can fix it. And I'll say one more thing that you might want to jot down. All people are born in relationship. We're wounded in relationship, and we can only heal in relationship. So we could talk 6 hours about that sentence. So I'll turn it over to Harville.
Okay. So, Stelli, I want to just add to your numbers. Who's counting? We actually have been married 40 years rather than 30. So add another decade to that.
And I proposed to him because he wanted to write a book.
Yes. And it has been a very interesting and tumultuous 40 years. We got remarried once. And then about 4 weeks ago, we decided, hey, we think we've made it. We're going to redo our wedding ceremony. So we now see ourselves as having gone through a wedding ceremony 3 times. And they say three is the that's enough. That's things come in threes. So we assume we've got it now. But to your question about the dynamics of intimate relationships, we spent many years doing couples therapy and studying the couples we were doing therapy with and doing research. And we had a background question, which is very generic, which is, why do couples fight? And so we didn't want to just help couples not fight or fight better, but to try to get to an understanding of how come it's so easy and how come it's so universal that couples start off in romantic love. First stage, life is great. It's wonderful, beautiful, technicolor. And within a short period of time, and the average is about 2 years, the glow goes away and we move from the first stage, which we label romantic love, the stage of attraction and bonding, to the power struggle, which is stage 2. And stage 2, we studied that for so many years, and we came to a very simple, finally, after having, I think we had one time a list of 26 reasons couples fight, and you realize if you have that many reasons, you don't have the right list, because it has to be more simple than that. And that finally we were able to reduce to 1, which is the primary conflictual dynamics in intimate partnerships, and that moves people into stage 2, which is the power struggle, is objection to difference. It's that simple. It is the apparent challenge, and in most cases, inability to connect with another human being in an accepting, validating way without conflict, and many times polarization, and, as you know, violence. And that if we then decided we would up the population for objection to difference, and did some work that we don't have time to talk about, but we got to, this is the human problem as well. If you look all across the world at all relationships, whether in corporations or countries, families, is the objection to difference, meaning that for reasons that we have 2 or 3 theories about this, but that to fully accept, embrace, integrate, and bless another point of view without judgment and criticism and tension is the biggest human challenge. And that's what couples are doing in the power struggle, trying to get the other person to negate themselves and become an extension of the other person. So that's a kind of a short, quick summary answer of the conclusion of our work, analytic work for the past 40 years.
May I add a closing sentence?
Please.
So I love, as we lecture on this, talking difference. I don't like different. I want the other person to think like me. Well, we say, you know what? Relationships are part of nature. And nature is dyadic, hot, cold, dark, light, wet, dry, sweet, sour. Everything in nature is different.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to learn to accept difference.
Yeah, and can I just add to that a little bit? So, and thank you for bringing that in. Is the question is, what are you going to do about difference? And the bottom line is, you have to accept it, because there's nothing else in the universe but difference. And that when we have begun to look at that through a variety of the sciences, and we finally looked at quantum physics, and the breaking of the particle and breaking down the particles, they've never found a particle in the breaking of a particle that was identical to another particle. There was always some variation that produced an interaction between the particles. And it turns out that the interaction between the particles is what determines the nature of the particle itself. So that was the other conclusion we came to, as relationship is fundamental reality, and we as individuals are derivatives of relationship. And therefore, we only have one choice, and that's to not only come to terms with difference, but to accept the fact that difference is the only thing there is, and then come to terms with that.
And learn to enjoy it. Well, in most cases. Come to think of it.
At least accept it.
Politically, it's a little hard.
The thing about enjoying it is that once you get over the need to negate another person and open up to who they are as different, what you find then is you're in another universe that is itself amazing and creative and wonderful. If you leave it alone, then you stretch into another universe. And then imagine that with any other person, any number of people, you will find that once you open to that. And so we use the aphorism, from judgment to curiosity is the path to connecting and self-enlargement.
Wow,
So
thank
I
you.
think that's about it for now.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure when we open up to the larger group, we're going to get into how to do that, and some ways that you've learned that can really help us overcome those resistances that we might have, or fears to being in relationship with whoever is different than we are. So thank you so much for that introduction. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Yosi, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, so just quickly though, I enjoyed your words and how the two of you played off each other, and in your different styles and the different energies and presence that you have. And to me, if you speak about the difference, it's a paradox. As we say, we're one, but we're all unique. And we're one, but we're not the same. So spiritually, we're one. And in our form, we're all different. So, and here we're talking about one particular aspect of that difference, which is gender or masculinity, femininity, energies, what have you. Anyway, let me introduce our next speaker, which I'm delighted, which is Katie here. Katie, it's a pleasure and an honor here to be with you and introduce you. I'm so sorry Gay couldn't be here with us because of his surgery and operation and so on. But I have followed both of your work. I followed your footsteps. You got a PhD at the same school I did many decades before me, and I've read your books about somatic orientation to therapy and couples work. And you and Gay have worked with many couples and have authored over 40 books, I believe, and trained thousands of couples coaches and therapists. And you've authored a couple of seminal books in this domain. Particular relevance is your book on conscious loving and conscious loving ever after, how we can create thriving relationships at midlife and beyond. And I think I'm probably past midlife. So anyway, but what I love about your books is really that they're both groundbreaking and powerful in the paradigms you talk about, and seeing relationship as a spiritual practice, so to speak. But they're also very vulnerable and human, where both of you have shared some of the challenges that the two of you have dealt with throughout the years. And some of it is very intimate. So I really appreciate your courage in doing that.
Thank you.
With all of that, I'm gonna call on you to continue to be transparent and vulnerable, and that's to share how gender dynamics is playing out in your relationship with Gay, and how that has evolved over time. So how is gender playing out maybe, several decades ago, 30, 40 years ago, and how's it playing out now, and how you both have evolved gender-wise in your holding of these energies of masculine and feminine, and then how does that change the dynamics of your relationship?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Well, first, I just want to appreciate you, Harville and Helen, because as you were talking about the stages of relationship, I was beaming, because our first stage is the romance stage, where you think, oh, I'm so lucky, and how could this possibly be happening? And then, which is followed by, we say, from anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, but we have seen people go as long as 2 years, is followed by the inevitable, which you experience as the power struggle, and which we have called I must have made a terrible mistake. That because the power of love brings to the surface, it's like opening the closets, and it brings to the surface aspects of yourself and of your relationship that you couldn't get access to in any other way. So it was so lovely to hear you coming to the appreciation of difference, and to feel that explorers that have been on different pathways have come to the same meadow, have come to the same place of the conclusion of the appreciation. For me, it's the appreciation of differences, and being able to not just accept, but to be willing to learn from each other. And that was one of the biggest dynamics for Gay and I when we first got together. I want to say just a couple of words about how I came into this. I started doing gender work in the 70s. I started doing consciousness raising in the 1970s, because I realized that for example, all of the characteristics of masculine and feminine on the APA, the California Psychological Association. I had people try those on as a felt experience, like to take on the different postures of the descriptions that they were describing. And then I put down what was considered masculine and what was considered feminine. And there was this kind of balloon deflating in the room when people realized that the things that were associated with feminine were basically lesser than. And so for many, many years, I've been, I remember one of my college professors appreciating my work, but telling me, you know, you really should be more feminine. And so after I stopped bristling, I said, and how would I do that? And how would you know that I were being more feminine? And he actually couldn't tell me that. So the whole dynamic of the continuum of masculine and feminine, I found this great quote just arrived in my email this morning from Margaret Fuller that says, male and female represent the two sides of the great radical dualism. But in fact, they are perpetually passing into one another. Fluid hardens to solid, solid rushes to fluid. There is no wholly masculine man and no purely feminine woman. And so how we experience that, Gay and I, in our relationship, we're now we've just entered into our 44th year together. And we've been married since 1981, which we never expected that we would be. And what we noticed right away is that the whole power struggle that you were mentioning, Harville and Helen, came to the fore right away because Gay was already a published author and a Stanford PhD. And I got my PhD from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, which is actually where I met Gay. And on practically every dynamic that you could say there is a difference, we were different. So he's a thinker and I'm a feeler, and he loves to have solo time and I love to be together. I was talking about this yesterday, as the difference between the glommers who love to be close and the splitters who must have their space. And so right away we were forced to look at, well, rather than, we spent some time in a power struggle trying to get each other to be like us. And then we quickly saw that there was so much more aliveness in actually learning from each other. And what we came to was that each of us is a unique and evolving work of art. So we came into it with, like, oh, we're going to just improve each other. We're going to take off the rough edges and make him or her more like me. And when we opened up to that each of us is able to receive and each of us is able to be strong and forceful, that, as one example, that and each of us loves to be close and loves to have separate time, we began to be able to learn from each other, which expanded not only our own experience of ourself and the possibilities, but the experience of co-creating together. The big thing that I want to say, though, and it occurred to me as I was meditating last night, is at the bottom of not being able to accept difference and actually flourish in the presence of difference is fear. And not just talking about fear, but the pervasive fear trance that we've been experiencing globally for quite some time now. And I've given a lot of attention over the last 6 years to developing a somatic approach to assisting people to move from fear to presence, the experience of separation. When I'm in fear, you become the enemy. And it's very difficult. And also I can't think. If I'm in fear, I'm going to get reactive and not actually be able to problem solve or co-create. And so adding in a perspective of befriending fear has for us been a very important aspect of opening to more gender fluidity. and the experience of becoming throughout our lives and throughout the lives of our relationships. And so that was something that I wanted to mention, because we have a lot of resources on our Foundation for Conscious Living website about befriending fear, for those of you who might want to dive into that more deeply. And the other thing I wanted to say was, when we label something, when you put a word to it, so like when they, them started, and people started wanting to claim their pronouns. And I was teaching in the middle of that and teaching seminars. And my students I'd start to say he, she, and they'd say they, and I would correct it. And I realized that by correcting that, it was changing my whole brain structure, to that having people labeled with words wasn't just the words. It created an inner structure that to shift that really shifted the way my brain worked. And so I think that the dynamic that society is creating now of more gender fluidity is not just an advantage to our being able to enjoy our aliveness and our individuality and our relationships more, but it's also, I think, an evolutionary tool that each of us can claim our uniqueness within the whole of gender, masculine, feminine, different continuums, in a way that allows our brains and our whole body brains to evolve. So we've had lots of experiences where we've moved from power struggle to appreciation. And from that, where we live now really is in supporting each other's creativity and really experiencing each other really as a living miracle, that we're grateful every day that we get to be together. And I feel that especially, I feel a little teary because when Gay fell and broke his leg, he got a very bad break. And so everything that I've learned, in the last many decades, I've brought to bear in assisting him and having all of the feelings that we're having and interacting with all of the medical people. So I just want to let you know that Gay sends his greetings, and that he is listening to us from the other room.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. It's very touching. I feel your care, your passionate care, and enlarging and evolving all of us individually and collectively. And you both have been helping us do that. So I'll turn it back to Stelli.
Yeah, thank you both. I can feel my brain working hard this morning. So thank you for that, that imagery. New neural pathways, I hope. All right. Well, I'm pleased to introduce you now to Sam Garanzini, who's the executive director and co-founder of the Gay Couples Institute, as well as his husband, Alapaki, who's the co-founder and clinical director of the organization. Both Sam and Alapaki, are licensed therapists who have helped over 4,000 LGBTQ plus couples improve their relationships. They're both certified Gottman therapists, and they published a groundbreaking study with Drs. John and Julie Gottman showing the effectiveness of using the Gottman method with same-sex couples. So Sam and Alapaki, you created the Gay Relationship Revolution program, which you've described as a powerful system for helping same-sex couples in committed relationships, as well as individuals looking to rapidly increase their relationship happiness and satisfaction in just 90 days. Like, that sounds pretty amazing to me. It's awesome. So you talk about how you developed this program to remove the obstacles that you felt as a young gay person, going to therapy, reading books, when really what you needed was a more straightforward path or method. So to me, when you have something that's born out of a need that you have personally, it makes it all the more powerful, something to bring forward to others. So I'm just really curious about how gender dynamics play out in same-sex relationships from all your experience, but also in your own relationship, how that's played out. So anything you care to share with us, that would be really helpful and interesting to know.
Wow, that's quite an introduction, and it's hard to follow our previous speakers. I'm in a room with greats. It's wonderful to meet you. Harville, I read your book when I was a young gay guy looking for answers to relationships. I was probably about 17. So I thank you for starting me on this questioning path of like, I mean, relationships are hard. They're puzzled. And there's like, and how do you figure that out? And thankfully, I think I figured out a lot of stuff a lot better than where I was before I met this guy. We've been together 18 years. It's been an amazing journey. And Katie and Gay, thank you for your contribution today and your works. We're huge fans. So it's wonderful to be in this room with such esteemed people. It's quite an honor to be asked to be here today. Alapaki, did you want to say anything as we get into this?
No, I think you have a lot to say about this topic. I saw a few questions come through. I think Caitlin and Gay and Harville can relate. Try being married to a therapist. It is wonderful, and it is also very difficult, but I would never trade it for anything. I would never do it all over again and change any of it.
Yeah. Wow. The question was about gender and how it shows up in relationships. And I think I wanted to, at least speak to some of the more recent changes as this becomes part of the national conversation, which is so healthy, thankfully. I am, as we've seen about 4,000 same-sex couples since about 2007, and we've started our program. We've published research on our own results, our own program. We've learned a lot about the expression of self and the expression of gender, thus, in intimate relationships. But what I think is really different about what we've seen over the last couple of years is as gender starts to change within a committed relationship. And that is something unique that we didn't initially see, but now we're starting to see couples who have been together for a while, even couples that have been with us and coming to see us maybe like once a month as part of our program. And they've been around us for 2-3 years. And Katie, just like you were saying, all of a sudden, now I'm having to correct myself when I say, how are you guys doing? And they're like, wait a minute, this person identifies as this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So getting used to that, I think that's wonderful. And it reminds me of a study that was done at the University of Towson. And these researchers identified this progression of these 4 parts that couples will go through as they get used to their partner's change in gender, or as they understand themselves. And I think this also ties in really nicely to what Harville and Helen were saying about the change that we experience through the evolution of a relationship. And Katie, as well as you were saying about questioning yourself and then experiencing the other and trying to create something new. And so what these researchers found was that the couples will begin with necessitating, like just validating the identity and just accepting that their partner is changing. And then it evolves into endorsement, where they will endorse the partner through language and behaviors. And then it goes into this phase of active learning, active self-education about their partner's identity. And then the final one that I'm experiencing in session is active defense of the partner. When I say, hey, how are you guys doing? And the other partner will jump in and say, wait a minute, it's like this. So I think that's a fascinating evolution as people go through their own self-understanding and in intimate relationships. And Alapaki does more of the clinical portion of our institute, and can talk more to like, well, how do couples deal with this as they actively like argue about it, or as they butt heads, or they realize that their partner is changing. But from I think a theoretical standpoint, that's what I hung my head on. I don't know, Alapaki, is there more you wanted to add to that? Or
Yeah, we have a lot of couples that come in. I think with what everyone is saying, there is some education and there's some people fear what they don't know. And if you imagine, even in same-sex couples, they've been together for many years. They both identify as gay cis male, if you will, and one comes out as non-binary years later. So as their relationship evolves and change and they look at gender differently, it really helps them face, so what do we do with this? How do we talk about this? We help them through communicating about it. What does this all mean? What does this symbolize? What's the dream around this? And most of the time, it's very much tied to sexuality, at least in the couples that we see. So we really take them through that journey in terms of having them talk through that and having them make sense of those gender dynamics and what that means to them.
Thank you both. That's fascinating. I'm sure we'll delve into that a little bit more deeply. Thank you. All right, Yosi, if you'll introduce our speaker, Alex.
And that was a perfect segue for our next panelist, Alex. I'm delighted to be back here with you, Alex. We were together this morning, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Just for people who weren't there, I'll just say something briefly that to remind us all, you are a family therapist, the certified gender specialist, the certified sex therapist, somatic experiencing trauma specialist, the clinical supervisor, and an award-winning author of several books on gender and sexuality. And I could say a lot more about your credentials, but what I want to focus on here in this panel, what I find particularly relevant is your experience working with many couples, both straight and queer, as well as your own personal story as a queer person. And I'm going to say another big word, that someone who's polyamorous. So we've been talking about committed relationships, and you might want to distinguish polyamory and committed relationship or not. But you are, as a polyamorous person, I understand you're in several committed relationships, but particularly romantic ones with two people that are of different genders. In your breakout session, which was titled Loving Beyond Gender Binaries, and your bonus item, you speak about that. So we'd love to hear your experience, both personal and clinical, around these issues, and how did those dynamics affect sexual attraction and ongoing committed relationship? And, does one person tend to occupy what we might call more the masculine pole or what have you, and the other the feminine? And what happens in queer couples where perhaps both people are gender fluid or trans? But it would be helpful to know, if you're willing, to share a little bit about your journey and story with these relationships, because I found it very fascinating when we talked about it.
Yeah, thank you, Yosi. I also want to really echo Sam about how fortunate and honored I feel to be in this room with all this amazing people doing all this wonderful work, and that I really relate to so much of what has been said already. I would say that I'm in two committed relationship, one of 23 years. So that's pretty committed. We also made a child together who's almost 20, and we still live together. And then my other relationship is going on for 6 years, and we co-parent another child who's come into my life when he was already about 6-year-old. So I get the experience of being both a gestational and biological parent and a step parent, and then being in all this relationship. So I definitely think about relationships a lot in my personal life, as well as in my professional life as a family therapist. I think in terms of gender, we have so many ideas about how important gender is in relationship, because, we think about our sexual orientation is dictated by who we're attracted to. And then we think about all the societal scripts, right? When I was listening to Katie talk, I was really resonating, with being told to be more feminine. 20 years later, in the early 90s, I had the same experience as a PhD student, in therapy. I was talking about some really oppressive experiences I was having with a professor, and the counselor was like, why don't you bake more or do some knitting, just some more feminine endeavors that will make you more likable rather than being this strident feminist, and I was like, and that was my last counseling session. And it definitely sparked an interest in what is therapy and especially family and relational therapy, And I actually think that, there's that gender has so much less influence in our relationship than we think. Let me break that down. I think there are lots of societal and cultural gendered expectations that put an incredible burden on lots of couples and relational systems. And as a family therapist, when I work, for example, with straight couples, I really see how that kind of constriction that we were talking about in the trans and non-binary panel, that gender policing, that gender restricting is really causing a lot of problems. Now, an advantage that I have as a non-binary therapist is that straight couples never know who I'm gonna align with. So you see the man going, well, you know what I mean? And then, they hold back, and then the woman goes, well, you can understand. And then they hold back, and I'm like, I kind of can understand you both. And now we're gonna break this down, right? And I so agree with how important differentiation is. But also there is this piece about how different people think they are when they're actually putting this whole layer on this other person that they're in relationship with. And what I mean by that is that often when you kind of pull the curtains aside of kind of gender and get people to be much more vulnerable and connecting from a place of authenticity and vulnerability, there can be so much more growth and evolution in a relationship, for example. Now, to make it a little more personal, sorry, my mouth gets dry a lot when I talk as kind of part of my health stuff. To make it a little bit more personal, I'm thinking about how often I'm asked, how do your relationships work, right? Both in terms of non-monogamy, being polyamorous, and also in terms of gender, right? And I think it's much more boring and simpler than people imagine. I mean, it's really boring. Literally when people who make documentaries about non-monogamy have approached me a couple of times, and then they were like, you're all too boring. There's zero drama. And that's true. There is zero drama, of course we have our tensions and difficulties. One of my partners, moved out for a year a few years ago, and that was hard, but we worked through it. And I think that, what is really at the heart of our relationship is communication, but also a desire to want the well-being of the other person. So if I think about Bell Hooks and how she talks about love and all about love, love is really about wanting to nurture the authenticity and individuality of the other person and to honor that. And I feel that's so foundational in my relationships, that feels really precious to me, right? So for example, when I got together with Michael, was my cisgender male partner of 23 years, I was actually an out lesbian at the time, which is why when I teased him that it took him a long time to figure out that I was trying to hit on him, it was like, well, you were a separatist lesbian. It was kind of hard for me as a cis man to understand that you had a romantic interest, right? But when we got together, there was really this feeling of, we don't know how this is going to work. I was also coming into my own consciousness of how monogamy hadn't worked very well for me as a survivor, and that I really felt safer actually in a non-monogamous relationship where I was not bound to one person. And I think that was part of my healing process at the time as well. And so there was this commitment to, we don't know how this is going to work, but we want to be in each other's lives. And it was very similar when I met my other partner, Ruth. There were a lot of things going on, but we knew, and we lived in two completely different states. but we knew we wanted to be in each other's life and we wanted each other's well-being. And that's kind of foundational to our relationships. Now, when it comes to that spark that you were talking about, right? Well, how does the, sexual spark or the intimacy spark works if there is no tension of masculine and feminine? For me, that's where there are so many more creative tensions in relationships beyond gender. Introverts, extroverts, people who kind of, pursuers, and withdrawers, right? It's like there are so many, people who love nature and people who would rather stay in a 4-star hotel, right? There are lots of differences that we have as individual human beings, which are often actually more impactful than gender, but we tend to really underestimate how all those differences can also generate a creative spark of attraction. And I think in that realm, I think that kink actually has a lot to teach us about how when we can play with power dynamics, with sensation in such a huge range of ways that doesn't have to be tied to this rigid gender binary of male or female only, right? And you don't have to be kinky to kind of necessarily understand that there are sometimes power dynamics in sexual relationships, but also that those power dynamics don't have to be fixed. They can be fluid, they can shift, they can be creative. If we look at sexual intimacy as play, and of course that's only for the couples where sexual intimacy is part of their relationship, because there's also asexual people in relationship where maybe that's not as central for them. But if we look at sexual intimacy as play, there are so many ways we can play with one another beyond this a little bit tired, I would say, gender script that gets handed down to us for relationships. So I'm going to pause there. I have a lot more thoughts, but I'll pause there for now.
Thank you. That was rich. So, yeah, you talked about difference. I know Harville and Helen, you talk about a different difference that you like to talk about, which is the maximizer minimizer. And maybe you want to say a few words about that, or anybody else in the panelists?
Well, I was, my life was really impacted when I read a book on feminist epistemology, and that certain people are left brain, architect. Thank God the ceiling isn't crashing in right now in the room where you are, and a doctor. I mean, we need left brain people, but the right brain hemisphere, I love the way they unpacked it, is they're equally smart, but they don't, it's a gut instinct smart. They don't know how they know things. They can't explain it, but they know them. And this is the artist, and like Beethoven probably was right brain, or whoever did the Sistine Chapel, or art. It's a different kind of smart, and so anyway, the minimizer is the left brain person. I have to focus, and the right brain hemisphere is what's beyond the room that we're in, what's next door. And that's more the maximizer. So basically, we do think people are one or the other, and in a relationship, we can give feedback to the other if Harville's a little bit unavailable to relate, or if I'm knocking on his door a lot going, Harville, but he can give me feedback on his need for quiet time and his own personal time. And then he can give me feedback and I can give him feedback. Well, okay, like I know you minimize, you have to do this, that, and the other, but why do we put on dance music in the kitchen and like go into bed? Why do we like do some dancing, which has actually happened the last 4 years he's never danced with me in in our 44 years of marriage, and suddenly we dance almost every night a little bit.
Before bed, huh?
No, well, sort of. Yeah, well, dinner, and then we watch a YouTube video, and then we go to bed.
Well, as you can tell that who we are, who's the minimizer and who's the maximizer here, because sometimes I'm being seduced into a dance at breakfast as well, or very
Right.
early in the morning. So I think the thing that that Helen has been, we've been in this conversation about the old question of couples conflict. In fact, it started when we met in 1977. We were both divorced and met at a party and started the conversation about how come we are divorced.
May I make it
Sure.
interrupt? Sorry to interrupt. Alapaki, you said, I'm married to a therapist. Okay, so maybe people don't know, but I have a master's in psychology. That was my first degree. And I wanted to be a Jungian analyst and interpret people's dreams. But then in my master's of psychology, I went to the Goulding Institute and learned redecision therapy, and Harville was teaching that. And to get 3 credits, I sat on the back of a class of 60 students where he taught, and I didn't meet him in the class because I knew everything, but I wanted the 3 hours. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to add to that was we began this conversation about a relationship in 1977, and we've been partners, equal partners, and co-authors of all the books and so forth through all these years. So what I'm going to say, I want to say that out loud so that Helen can take responsibility for what some of the stuff I'm saying. And if I get it wrong, she will help me say it more correctly. And it was interesting, Katie, to hear how you and Gay have been so co-creative during all those years, and you would not be who you are and produce the corpus of material. 40 books? I thought we had done something with our 11, but y'all must write most of the time. Yeah, and congratulations on that, and our condolences and prayers for his rapid healing. I'm sorry, I was looking forward to seeing him today because the 4 of us have been on the same circuits, but not. Now I'm on the same circuit, but not on the same stages a lot for the past 40 years. You married in 81, we married in 82, so we've been on the.
Yeah, and who would ever thought there would be 2 Hendrixes?
Well, you spell yours Ritkas, which means you all came from royalty, and our Hendrix were the exit. We were the commoners over time. But I want to just pick back up on the one of the 2 things you said about the minimizer maximizer, and say, and I was glad, Alex, to hear you say how boring the gender issue can be, and how interested, how so many people want us to be interested in it, and that's been my experience. So some of the leading imago relationship therapists who are lesbian and came on 35 years ago, and kind of wanted me to be really interested in the fact that she was lesbian. And I had asked her, well, how interested are you in the problem of how you made that decision? Because she had been married, had 3 children, and decided to come out and to marry another woman. And she's now our best friend, and we got over being enthused about her gender identity, because what was the problem was more the personality and the defensive system that we have than our gender identity, because no matter how we may identify, we still have to talk to people. And talking to people is, Helen and I have defined, we have sort of focused on dialogue has a very rigid and specific structure of conversation. And because talking is
the most
dangerous thing
thing
people do. And listening is the most infrequent thing people do. And our breakout is going to be on that after this. So I just wanted to say that the thing that we arrived at, that no matter whether you're a minimizer or maximizer, and you can certainly create conflict out of any way the other person expresses their energy, which is all that is. One expresses it, voluptuously, and the other one sort of holds on to it. And the other one then doesn't, wish you would say more, and I wish you would say less. But the thing that's important to us that we've discovered, and important to couples, because one of the ways, and I'm sure Katie, you and Gay did the same thing, you ask couples what they need and discover that they know better what it is than you are. And so then you finally put together a tapestry that is so inclusive, but it's fundamental. There are only 4 or 5 things, but that small amount includes the diversity of people. Ask them what they need, and you finally get the answer if you parse it. Throw away all the excess stuff. And what couples need is safety. They need to feel that when I'm with you, I'm not going to be hurt. And it's that simple. And you're not going to put me down. You're not going to glare at me and growl at me or turn away from me or be aggressive toward me. That when I walk in your presence, you were talking about play, Alex, and if I don't know who did the research, but I read it and I remember the author for a while and then I forget it, but I don't forget the conclusion they came to. But that spontaneous play is the top feature of the most thriving relationships. Now, when you hear that, it takes a lot of the pathology that we spend our time mulling through and throws it out the window. Is that what we have to do is become safe enough with our partner to spontaneously initiate play. And to do that without wondering, are they going to respond? Like Helen has to, for a long time, couldn't anticipate that I would respond to an invitation to dance without growling about it, because I grew up on a farm where we learned how to walk, but we didn't learn how to move our feet and dance. So it took a long time to train my feet to move in some other way. But I just like to come back to say that that's the focus is safety. And when you get people to safety, whatever issues they are engaged with in their lives, or their identity, or their personality, or the defenses that they are working to try to relax or increase, if people can feel safe, then something magical happens, which is that somehow the body and the brain and the emotions tend to move towards some normative pre-existent state in which our true nature as human beings begins to kind of repopulate our nervous system. And so what we find, it makes therapy so simple. I don't have to go through all these complex things or listen to a lot of complex stories. What we need to do is help them talk, help the partners talk in such a way that they eventually feel safe with each other while talking. And then their neuroses, their pathology, many of the issues just begin to melt away because they were all a function of the defenses that are activated by the fear of talking. And I think, and I want to say one last thing before I give the thing back is Helen has been a generative contributor to the Imago relationship system. And the main thing, the core thing was that she introduced dialogue into our personal system, Katie, and it was in 1977. We were dating, just started dating, and we've always had an intense relationship, and intensely negative as well as intensely positive. And we were into an intensity in her living room, and Helen said, "Stop. One of us talk and the other one listen." And we had never done that. I mean, I'm so embarrassed to recall the story because I had a PhD. I was in clinical practice. I'd been a university professor. I had all the credentials of a civilized human being, and I was behaving like an animal in that situation. But I did stop. And then as a clinician, as you all clinicians know, you notice stuff. And I noticed I calmed down. And then I realized in my couples work at that time, I had never put couples into a conversation with each other. It was primarily psychotherapy of two people in the same room. And so it's called parallel psychotherapy. I mean, I call it now parallel psychotherapy. It was called couples therapy, but it's actually parallel psychotherapy, in which the one talks to you and the other one talks to you. And then you ask the other person, what do you think about what your partner said? And then, and you get into all kinds of horrible stuff that way. And the success rate was 40% at that time. I mean, industry wide, it was 40%.
So Katie, you're nodding a lot. So I'm wondering what's.
Oh, well, I'm just so, did you finish what you wanted to say, Harville?
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing. I took this one talk, the other one listened, then to my clinical practice with couples, and noticed, my God, when I turn them to each other and start talking, the whole room changes. Mm-hmm. And so it took about 6 or 8 years to develop all the details of the dialogue process that we now use. But that became the only thing we do is help couples talk until they feel safe with each other.
And could I mention something, even if we're a little behind? It's about 3 or 4 sentences. Is that okay? Or should I? Okay. So a psychiatrist heard Harville and I do a lecture in public once, and she had come to this gathering, didn't introduce herself to us, and flew back, and she called us. And she said, in our psychiatry department, someone's suicidal, someone can't sleep and is anxious, and we medicate them and we separate them from their families. And I've always felt like we should bring the families together with the person suffering with anxiety or suicidal thoughts. And she said a sentence: for the first time in the history of the world, you all have made the relational sciences teachable. And so I do a chart that this woman came and spoke to us in 2018. And we were teaching someone this room how to do dialogue, which we love doing. But there's a person that lived in 300 BC that almost everyone in the United States and maybe other countries has heard his name. It's Socrates. And he created Socrates in 300 BC.
He created dialogue.
I'm sorry.
Socratic dialogue.
Socratic dialogue. And so I drew this little piece of paper that after the Greeks said, stop doing that, you're disrupting the youth, and they put him to death. And he drank poison the night before that he was going to be killed. Since then, we've had nothing but back to Egypt with the Pharaoh. God spoke to the Pharaoh, and then there were slaves in Egypt, so you had to obey the Pharaoh, and then emperors and and then kings, and you follow what the king says. And the French didn't like that, and they revolted against the king. And the United States, the French Revolution, then the American Revolution. But everyone is just doing parallel monologue. Look at Washington, D.C. right now. And so we really think the world needs dialogue.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you all so much. So Alapaki and Sam, I'm curious about some of your experience and trying to move the conversation to a more personal level. Again, going back to this idea of gender dynamics and polarities, just in your personal relationship, if you're open to sharing, like, how does that play out? Like, do you feel like the gender is kind of a more stable thing for both of you, and it's been that way the whole time in your relationship, or has it shifted during your time together? Maybe the work that you've done with folks has had an impact. I don't know, or this time that we're living in. Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, we met 18 years ago, and I would say, as a same-sex couple, people often ask, or they wonder, who's the man, who's the woman? That's how that has always come out. And as I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii. I grew up in Hawaii, and so as being Asian, people would often label me or just assume I'm the woman, and Sam, as the white cis male, is the man. And so growing up, even, that was 18 years ago, I think things have changed, but that was the message that we always got as in our same-sex relationship. And so I think part of it is education. Part of it is you just have to let it slide. People will think what they think. And, but that would be my experience, growing up, it was, or not growing up, or just in the 18 years of this relationship, those were some of the things that were the conscious or unconscious messages or conversations that came up.
Yeah, I think, boy, that's a hard question. I think there's a few things going on is in terms of our relationship, one thing that I have really come to appreciate is two components. One is I really appreciate his experience of being a gay Asian male. And that is something, as we've gotten older, as I have actively seen him get treated differently by members of our own gay community, as opposed to me. Very small things, what we might call microaggressions. But I kind of like Alex was saying, I don't think this is necessarily, it's not just about gender. It's about power sometimes. And it's about people viewing their views of who controls the power. And these are words and dynamics, just like Katie was saying, like be more of a woman. And what they're really telling you to do is change the amount of power that they think you have. And that's super dangerous. And so I've watched that play out as just power in terms of ethnicity, white, Asian. And it's been really important, kind of like Harville was saying, in our own house, when he has had an experience, for me to not defend against it, not minimize it, but stop what we're doing and go, whoa, tell me about why you think that happened. Oh yeah, I saw that too. And genuinely mean it. Find pieces to validate is what we teach in the Gottman method, but acknowledge the difference in power and make sure that doesn't continue into our house, because this does need to be a place where he feels safe. So I think that's another piece. The other component that I did want to put out there is we know from the research that same-sex couples are kinder to each other when they argue. And I've definitely seen, like in our relationship, we've only, I think, had a few moments where we've just become really aggravated at each other, like to the point of like name calling and contentious and contemptuous, we would say in the Gottman method, and then quickly backed off because it felt so foreign. And then did a lot of repair and talking about, whoa, what was that about? What was happening there? I think in our relationship, though, we have like doubled down on our friendship over the years, to where there's many days where as I leave and leave the house, I go, I want you to know you're all I have. And gosh, I didn't expect to say that. It's hard to say here. But we've pushed our friendship and just how important that is.
I just have one more follow-up question for Alapaki. So you talked about kind of people labeling you like, are you like the woman? And to me, and then we're talking about power. And to me, traditionally, women have had the lesser power. So along with that, there's the gender lens also of, I'm assuming that that means they're associating you with being more passive, or, Sam holds the power in the relationship. And so I'm just curious about inside, closed doors, how the power dynamics do play out in your relationship. If you care to talk about that.
Spot on, Stelli. That's correct. We oftentimes say women's rights is also gay rights. How women are viewed in many ways. That's how gay men are also viewed as well, to less power. Behind closed doors, we really, we teach this, or we facilitate couples, same-sex couples in our clinics to do this. But we always tell them we are a normal couple like any other couple. We try to role model the very behavior that we're teaching. And so we do that. Part of it is to be aware, what is that power differential? I think when we first met, as Sam said, he didn't know that existed, the microaggression. And I'm really careful to not label everything as a microaggression. So I'm very careful about that too. But I remember when we first met, I would say, see, look what happened there. He goes, nah, that's not it, and he would dismiss it a lot. And I think through the years, I would point that out. And as he said, oh yeah, there might be something to that. And I think one of the best things Sam has done recently is to read White Fragility, and to understand some of those power dynamics. But even before Black Lives Matters and the books that have come from that, or in that period just recently, we spent a lot of time talking about power dynamics, our roles. That's part of our, what we would call our shared meaning. What are our roles? What are our assumed roles? What do we want our roles to be? It's a lot of conversation, as Harville and Helen has said. Conversation and talking and being transparent is the way to go. It's not talking, it's not bringing up things up, it's secrets and not being transparent that tears relationships apart. So I think we have weekly check-ins, we have daily check-ins. They're actually more fun and less structured and rigid as I'm making it sound, but we check in on each other and we have a lot of communication about roles and power.
Yeah. And it's I'll just finish with John Gottman says in his lectures, in his classes, same-sex couples have a lot to learn, or straight couples have a lot to learn from gay couples. One of those things that you'll see with a gay couple, and I just say same-sex couples, this was lesbian, LGBTQ plus. Behind closed doors, there's active negotiation of roles. And I think even the other panelists in committed heterosexual relationships understand that over time, your roles change, right? Like who does what? It just has to. And that ultimately should be one of the take homes, I think, for the people watching, is that your roles change. And the more that you can move away from that, what you prescribe, should a man do, should a woman do, and those shoulds, that's where you will find happiness. That's where you'll reinforce your friendship, right? And so that is what we've always seen behind closed doors for us, is we talk about who has the role around money lately, who has to accomplish this or that. Like he went and got a second master's degree, that changed our roles. I went and got another job working for the city, that changed our roles. And so things just evolve. And I think the other panelists can totally relate that happens over time, and you must embrace that.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I'll share real quick. I don't know if you all saw the women's panel, but Tammy Simon, who's an openly gay woman, the founder of Sounds True, she was talking about how when she met her partner, her life partner, she had more money. She was like 11 years older than her partner. So she automatically assumed, okay, the power dynamic, I'm going to have 51% and you're going to have 49% is how she approached it. And right away, you know, her partner's like, 100% and 100%, you know, like we're in this together. We're going to build each other up to be like the best that we can be. And to me, that goes back to what you all are, I think, alluding to is, you know, how do we see each other and build each other up? And so it's really beautiful. So Kathleen, Caitlin, what do you have to say? We haven't heard from you in a little while.
Oh, well, I'm first, I just want to celebrate the inclusion and the commonalities that we're sharing. You've seen me nodding because I'm going, yes, yes. And that just makes my heart very happy that we have different ways of expressing. I think the not just, for me, not just safety, safety to begin with, but how we get to safety is through presence. So presence, we have chapters on this in our various books and teach in our seminars. And basically what we're doing is adding the body. So adding spontaneity, adding impulse, adding what we call tossing. So that when Gay would say something to me, he's actually tossing. And what I used to do, he would toss something to me and it would just kind of bonk and fall off because I would get kind of frozen and he said something really smart and I didn't know how to respond. And so I learned that I could acknowledge that I was scared and that I could commit to learning how to toss. So it was, and for me, like learning how to dance. I know how to dance, but I didn't know how to toss. And that whole element of receiving and then resonating and then responding is something that can involve your whole body and can allow your relationship to not only have a very solid foundation, but to keep evolving in the different ways, just like an amoeba shapes to what's going on in the environment. And what has increased for us over the years is fun. And play. And that from presence, in fact, my whole trajectory right now is what I call presence, connect, play. We even have an app. There's a free app on the App Store. It's called Presence, Connect, Play. You can find, which gives you specific ways to presence, how to presence, then how to connect, but then ultimately how to play. You know, just like Heraclitus's 53rd fragment, that the universe is like a child at play with colored balls. And the more couples learn that whatever is coming up can be played with, the more we have been experiencing this open space of not just creativity and creativity, but co-creativity that actually ripples out to other people, whether we have direct interaction with them or not. And so when Gay was in the hospital, I was really focused on helping him get his needs met. What we heard from the staff, they came in and said to Gay, you're the most amazing couple we've ever seen. You laugh all the time. You're how you're tender with each other. What is it that you're doing? They didn't know who we were, but I thought, wow, if we can show up that way, even in a kind of a crisis, you know, where something is really challenging, to me, that let me know that what we're all exploring here has such tremendous possibility for allowing people to experience themselves really as evolving works of art, and that we can support each other in how are you expressing yourself today? How does that want to, and how can I support that? And we have definitely, you know, flowed in and through each other and with changes, but the thing you were talking about, Helen and Harville, of safety, the sense that I realized that I didn't have to edit myself around Gay. I could just blurt whatever was going on, and he would receive it. And that kind of high level play is just extraordinarily nourishing. So I would say I'm in complete agreement with what everybody has been talking about. And to me, that makes me very happy. And that there are all kinds of pathways for people to experience their own evolution that will contribute not only to their own lives, but to the people around them.
Yeah. So just on that, I mean, safety and play, my understanding and what I've seen is that play emerges out of safety. And that's kind of the natural thing. Now, I want to also piggyback on one other thing, which is the relationship as an environment for the evolution of each individual. And I think of it through the lens of a spiritual practice. So I'm wondering if you or anybody else wants to talk about how you see relationship as a spiritual practice and sort of the helping unfoldment of each individual unique soul and its greater purpose. And also, to what extent does the relationship serve a purpose beyond those two individuals?
Alex, I think you can comment on this.
Yeah, I would love to jump in there. Having so many thoughts, I'm trying to organize in my very ADHD brain, but I was thinking about power and safety and gender and how, and there will be a spiritual bit in there, Yosi, I promise, but I was thinking about how much healing I had to do to be truly able to love Michael as a cisgender man, for example, right? It's like, as somebody who was being like a survivor of child sexual abuse, intimate partner violence, that was not an easy, there was a safety that I felt in the same gender relationship when I was still femme identified, that all of a sudden it was like the bottom was taken out, right? And now I was back in, in a relationship with a cisgender man, cisgender white Anglo man, who in a way embodied threat, for me. And I think that a lot of people can probably relate, just because sadly, due to kind of all the systems that we're immersed on, right? Violence is often perpetrated in one direction, although not exclusively. I always want to say there's plenty of intimate partner violence, unfortunately, in same gender relationships, men towards women. So it's not exclusive, but it's a thing that we need to address. And I think for me, there was really a soul healing, a spiritual healing in being with such a gentle man who gave me the space to heal from my own trauma, and that who understood deeply that often when I was reactive, from my own complex PTSD, that wasn't personal. And that gave me the space to kind of do my own healing journey with that, because there wasn't an immediate necessarily understanding or shared experience. And what allowed me, I think, to do that journey towards safety and intimacy with this person beyond my fear, right, was that on a spiritual level, I always felt that I couldn't fully heal. I was raised a second wave feminist. My PhDs in, it was literally women's studies at the time, because I'm over 50, it would be gender studies now, right? And in second wave feminism, like I think men and women were seen very differently. I mean, Katie talked about consciousness raising and was like, yep, all of that. And I think for me, I always knew that as long, also because I could perceive that within me, I wasn't just a feminine person. I always had this masculine piece, right? I couldn't heal myself until I healed this relationship with a gender that was perceived as opposite as mine at the time. Of course, then I kind of transitioned during our relationship as well, and that's a whole different story. But there was a piece of me that on a spiritual level knew that the answer wasn't separatism, that the answer wasn't taking myself completely out of this gender equation in some way and not ever engaging with masculinity or with cis men ever again. And that was a huge piece of spiritual healing for me. But I think there's been spiritual growth for Michael as well, as a cisgender man who never had to question, he's like 6'7", who never has a PhD, never had to question a lot of the privilege that he walks around with in the world, And, we're also in intercultural relationships. So we had lots of conversations around how important it was to be able to respect both our cultures and not to feel like one was superior to the other, especially when we started having conversations around parenting. And so I agree that safety is foundational, but there is a piece of gender that often we need to heal to truly be able to connect on a soul level, on our spiritual level with our partners. If we are to truly connect beyond all of the trauma, right? That a lot of and I truly believe that, I said this morning that I feel like every gender binary is this legacy of settler colonialism, Christian supremacy, white supremacy, right? And it hurts all of us. And so there is a piece that we heal in intimate relationships around this that I don't know how else I would have healed it. I'm sure there would have been some ways. And there's other pieces that I've healed in my relationship with Ruth, who's trans and non-binary. And so there is a different understanding and a different connection. But I'll pause there because
I just want to highlight, I see you're raising your hand, Helen. I'll just turn it to you. I just want to highlight one quick thing, which is, so in healing with your cisgendered men, you enlarge your heart. And I see that as healing with him, but then you open your heart to cisgendered men more broadly. So that individual psychological healing I see tied to a spiritual healing, as you said, which is whenever we close our heart towards anybody, we're hurting ourselves, and it's really limiting our heart's capacity to love. So anyway, I just wanted to link in the individual healing in relationship and the broader healing that you get in its spiritual dimension. So off to you, Helen. Thanks.
Many of you know Dan Siegel, the interpersonal neurobiologist, and I was reading through his handbook, and one chapter begins something about that the beginning chapter says something about another thing about people's brains that's you should learn about is it's the left brain knowing rational, the right brain knowing, connect the dot knowing. But it's really when you move beyond predication and you don't know, and that's a dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And after reading that first paragraph, I thought that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Not knowing is a good thing. But then the more I read about it, Dan talks about when you move beyond predication, you're in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and it really, and you wonder, and dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, serotonin is released from your brain, and it flows through your bloodstream, and you're a healthier person, and you live longer. But when I read that, and I've called Dan, I thought, Dan, thank you. But, and it's called the Dalai Lama state, when you wonder. And so in addition to dancing, I also like wondering about Harville instead of improving him, which I was really good at that too, but he didn't like that one. And we have a healthier marriage because I just often say, well, is there more about that? And or just when we take walks, I used to, well, check in, see how his day was. I was busy, he was busy. Well, why don't we just why don't we take a walk and I not talk? The leaves and look at the clouds. So anyway, I think it's a spiritual, bringing spirituality into your life, and you are a healthier person when you move beyond predication according to Dan. And I actually feel it. I felt it when I learned to do that more.
Yeah, and I'd like to make a comment about spirituality and to pick up on what you're saying about predication is a splitting because it's a labeling. And to me, I've worked with the concept of spirituality actually for over 50 years. So finally you have to define it so that you know what you're working with. And it finally dawned on me that that connecting and unity and oneness are terms that always seem to be in spirituality conversation. And that, and then quantum field theory is now positing that connecting is being, that's not something you do or can stop doing. It's what we are connecting. But we don't know it. And when we're anxious, we don't know it because we're anxious about all these issues that we've been talking about. And then you feel yourself as separate because now you're in your defense, which cuts you off from being and from connecting. So that spirituality to me is, and I think we would agree on this, that once you create this mode of safety in interacting, you actually discover safety drops the defense structure and you move into connecting as a felt experience. It's no longer a wonderful quantum theory, nor something the Dalai Lama said about oneness. It is experiencing being itself, and then you know you're there when you're feeling joyfully alive. It's a neurophysiological sensation. It's not a cognitive thing or an emotional thing. It's a full being thing. And so that spirituality is that. And then it's interesting, healings occur spontaneously in those places, emotional healings as well as physical healings, because when you're in being, everything is okay. And once we are resonate with being, things begin to happen that are spontaneous because we are returning to our original state. So to me, that spirituality is a term that would hold that, but you could also say this is going on whatever you call it. This is the wonder of being. That anyway, just thought I'd throw that in, that I don't like to split off spirituality, but find it. It's the core, it's the base, it's the essence of reality.
Absolutely. Sam, you had your hand up too. Were you going to?
I was going to say a lot of what Harville said a lot better than I can. Is if you look, it was your original question, Yosi, it reminded me of Buddhism and Taoism, which talk about the ability for two people and two energies to come together to create something more. And I just wanted to, I guess, I know we're getting close to the time, but finish. You remind me of a story that highlights one of my very bad habits that he has pointed out. And we learned early on that when we travel, we would go to Amsterdam or wherever. I like, once we get there, to pretend that we're going to move there. And so I will go look at real estate. I will talk about how we get the dog there, how often our parents are going to be able to visit. And this will just freak him out because all of a sudden our whole life is changing. And, oh, I could do this, and we'll work from our laptops and we'll see clients like this. And after this would bring up arguments. And I would talk about, what we would do with our savings and the whole 9 yards. And then one day he said, "Is this play or is this pray?" And I said, "Oh, no. This is just play." And he said, "Okay." And so he created this space for me to just play with ideas of what it would be like to be a local in Amsterdam or in Berlin. And what it's done is it's created new pieces of me where I now love learning foreign languages. I now love other cultures and things like that. So I just think that's just a small version of how relationships bring us to new versions of ourselves that we did not know were even possible had we just not embarked on it.
Yeah,
I love that story. What a powerful, you're changing Alapaki's neural pathways right there, talking about the brain expanding. And Caitlin, earlier in your session, like you were talking a lot about wonder and how to have wonder, like instead of defensiveness with your partner. And some of these things we're talking about, like they're great in theory, but unless we have like an embodied way of practicing, it's hard to actually change. Like it's a great idea, but like, how do I get my reactions to change? And one thing you said about wonder, you added this component of like bringing sound to it. I don't know if you want to share that here, but I thought that was super helpful.
Yeah, thank you. What we do, particularly to integrate brains, the sides of your brain, and to move from critical brain into wonder brain, is to create a through a whole out breath, rather than the of, you did it wrong, but the literally opens wonder. And so we like to share questions like, I wonder how I could support you in this, or what is it we could do to resolve this, or what do we want to do today? And so it moves us into the unknown with safety, and makes such a bridge too when people are caught in criticism and the power struggle. So the and we have all kinds of those kinds of embodied practices. Because we've really, I would say that I've recently said that what we do is the how of consciousness. And our work is also described as practical magic. So we really do our best to include both aspects of our being, all of those opposites and continuums, so that they can dance together. And when they do, they create something new that and has kept me interested and enlivened and growing for all of these years. And the people who learn how to employ some of these techniques also find that they can create their own blueprint for growth and for expansion.
Thank you. So we have like 9 minutes left on this panel. So I'm curious, any burning things to share? Yosi, do you have any burning questions we haven't asked yet?
No, I'm curious to hear what you would want to ask each other. What would any of you want to ask somebody else here?
I'm going to throw out an idea. I don't have a question, but when Harville and I give workshops, we are vulnerable about struggles we've had, and I really appreciate, and people respond that they're so grateful.
Oh yeah.
And I think I don't want to lecture on relationships, and a listener thinks, oh, it's easy for them. I'm coupled with a jerk, and my jerk's awful, and I'm about to leave.
Me, are you? Yeah.
So I think the vulnerability of sharing struggles that we have can be one of the most important things we do.
I was just looking at the Q&A, and some have been answered as we've been going along, but tied to that, Helen, and some of the things we've been talking about, somebody asked, what is safety and who is responsible for this? And I think that's a really important question.
Okay, I have an answer.
Okay.
If Harville thinks he's not safe, given what I said, my tone of voice, the look in my eye, I'm not safe. Safety, the other person can give you feedback on if it's safe to be with you. And again, voice tone, expression on your face, in addition to words, make a relationship unsafe, or you can choose to make it safe. And we talk about 4 things in a relationship that brings safety into the relationship. And maybe that's what we're going to do on the next whatever.
Yeah.
But it, you can go, well, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Well, if the other person experienced a rupture, it needs a repair.
Yeah, we are really radical about safety. And the way we make it radical is we talk about zero negativity, because it's really clear that the brain hears any negation and goes into a defensive mode. And you can't keep your brain from going to the defense, if the brain hears a put down of gentle or rigid. So one of the things that we start with in our workshops and in therapy is that it's not, are you willing, but if you want what you're saying you want, there's a condition you have to meet to get it. And that is, you have to be safe for each other. And that means a zero negativity pledge. Now, we know you're going to blow it, because, the brain scientists say that our brains are biased toward the negative, but for hundreds of thousands of years, the brain couldn't operate on a safety principle because it would be killed or eaten. But we don't have that anymore. And we can do that and retrain our brains, not to go paranoid, but to go into a curiosity.
Can I make a comment? You can bring up problems, but you make an appointment and you convert a frustration into a request. I mean, you must bring up, you can't hide how you feel. So any problem, anything you don't like, deal with it, but deal with it in a way that the other person doesn't throw up their hands and leave the house and go to get in the car. Convert a frustration into a request. And when we tell our couples to do that, we say, and the best thing to do is make a request that the person can do. It can be a little baby step, and then you can ask for more, and they can make another baby step, and help them succeed at being the partner that you want them to be.
Amen.
Yeah, I'd love to say something about safety briefly as well. Somebody asked, what is safety, and also who's responsible for it? And for me, it's very much a both and, right? It's like there's a piece, for me, safety, first of all, means that I am present here and now. And that's because I think that when we are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we're not. So when we're in a trauma reaction, we're not in the here and now. When we don't feel safe, we cannot be present. And so, for example, even as a family therapist, if I'm working with the relational system where somebody's in a trauma response, well, there is not enough safety to continue the conversation. We need to come back to safety and presence first. So for me, safety is being able to be in the here and now, and also recognize when I'm not, right? But there's also a piece that's relational. I can't do this by myself. There are objectively, the world is not, in the US specifically, is getting smaller and smaller in terms of safety for me as a trans person on a collective level. And I need to be in relationship also with people who understand and recognize that, right? And so there is also a relational aspect to other people also creating the conditions for safety, especially if they have more power, if there is a systemic power imbalance, right? Because power is not just individual, it's also interpersonal, and it's on a systemic level. So yes, there is a piece where I'm responsible for my healing, for understanding of my triggers, for my emotional regulation, for all the beautiful somatic tools. I love, Katie, I was like, yes, I can feel it, in my body, like how that opens us up to curiosity and wonder, right? But there needs to be a relational piece where how do we create conditions of safety for one another, both in romantic relationships, but also when we parent, in our friendships, at work, right? We can't just, well, if you feel unsafe, that's your problem. That is not leading to connection and relationship, right? We need to understand if another person feels unsafe, what can I do to create better condition for safety in this relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or not? And how the more we can create safety for each other, the more we can be with each other. I love what you said, Harville, about connecting is being. Exactly. So the more safety we can feel with one another, the more we can be in relationship to one another.
And I think to follow on with that, that how you do it is listening with curiosity and without judgment. My theological mentor back in graduate school, Paul Tillich, said, listening is the first act of love. And that you don't get anywhere towards spirituality or connecting without listening. And that's the most infrequent thing we do as human beings, is listen. We know how to talk, but we didn't get listening down. It's like culture trained us to make noise, but not how to hear noise and receive it without judgment.
Yet we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Right. and these are way undeveloped, but this is overdeveloped.
Wow. So we're coming here at the end of our time, and I just wanted to say how grateful I am for your time, your presence, your beauty, joy, everything that you've shared with us. It's really been truly a great session. And hopefully everybody who's listening in can have a chance to go to some of the individual sessions. We've got another bank of them coming up in a couple of seconds. I'm going to turn it over to our MCs, Teju and Jordan, who are going to tell us about what's coming up this afternoon. But again, a heartfelt thank you to all of you for being here today. Hopefully it was an enriching time for you as well. So thank you.
I got some good tips for my relationship, so I'm delighted about that.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's been a delight spending time with you. Thank you.
Yes,
All right.
thank you for having us. We are honored to be among you.
Thank
Indeed.
you.
Likewise.
All right, Teju and Jordan, take it away.
Thank you, Stelli. Wow, that was wonderful. I mean, we're always in a relationship somehow, so this just seems so profoundly relevant, everything that we've talked about. Jordan, how do you feel after that session?
I feel like I want to be in a relationship, but I also don't want to be in a relationship.
And you're also in many relationships.
Yeah, exactly. No, I learned a lot. I actually think that it was for someone who has been in relationships and has been through recently been through a pretty life-altering heartbreak. I would say I was absorbing a lot and thinking a lot and processing a lot. Maybe, Teju, a good thing to do, since we've heard so much, is just have a moment of silence. I don't know if a debrief, what do you think about that? That was actually your idea.
That'd be perfect. I would love it. I love silence. Yeah, let's just take a few deep breaths and sit with what's been shared.
Thank you. Yeah, incredible. I don't know about everybody else at home or wherever you happen to be, but I feel like this is a summit, but I also feel like it is a spiritual retreat in a way. I'm being fed so much, and I do feel like I have a separate stomach for dessert, but even that stomach feels full right now. It's like there's so much sweetness, so much richness, so much goodness that's coming out of this. So I hope everyone's feeling fulfilled. What do you think, Teju?
I agree. And I think we're about to take a break here just to help with that digestion process until the top of the hour. So we have a few announcements to share right before that. So